Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, or in English, the Sabbath, is the centerpiece of Jewish life, and has been so since the infancy of the Israelite nation. According to the Talmud, Shabbat is equal to all the other commandments. Shabbat is so central to Jewish life that the term Shomer Shabbat, or Shabbat observer, is synonymous with religious Jew in common parlance. Shabbat is a day of rest and celebration that begins on Friday at sunset and ends on Saturday evening after nightfall. Let's have a look at the history, importance, and observances of this day. We read in the book of Genesis that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. The sages say that on that day God created manucha, or rest. Without such sustained creativity would be impossible. After God took the children of Israel out of Egypt in the Hebrew calendar year 2448, He taught them about the Shabbat, working for 6 days and resting on the seventh. Shabbat is also one of the 10 commandments God transmitted at Sinai several weeks after the Exodus. Thus, Shabbat commemorates both the creation of the world and God's intervention in world affairs when He took His nation out of slavery. Throughout the 40 years that the children of Israel wandered in the desert, nourishing manna would rain down from heaven, except on Shabbat. But no one went hungry. Extra rations would fall on Friday, so that everyone would have more than enough for the holy day. The root word for Shabbat is the Hebrew word shabbat, which means to be complete, to seven oneself, swear or charge with an oath, to take an oath, or make to swear. By participating in the Sabbath, we are completing an oath made to God and God to us, the 7-day cycle. The Sabbath was observed by Yeshua and His disciples in the Gospels. Paul observed the Sabbath in Acts. There was no Sunday worship until after the death of Paul and the apostles, and most likely came out of the church in Rome, which during the life of Paul had prevented Paul from visiting and guiding the church for the first 5 years of its existence. By the time Paul writes his letter to the assembly in Rome, there were factions and divisions taking root within. Although Sunday did not become the day of worship for Christians until Emperor Constantine made it a law in the late 300s Common Era. The counter-argument made here by the Protestant Church that Christians are not to observe the Sabbath day was, since Yeshua was an observant Jew, He was merely following what was required for Jewish people to follow. Yet Yeshua seemed to ridicule the Pharisees about tying heavy loads upon the necks of believers with oral traditions that had nothing to do with Torah. The other argument made was the only commandment not expressed by Yeshua in the New Covenant was the Sabbath day being observed by the modern-day church. This was only for the Jewish believers. Yet there is evidence in Acts. After Yeshua ascended into heaven, the early first-century non-Jewish believers met each week on the Sabbath. These arguments were never a consideration in the early church, as the Sabbath day was always Saturday, and are rooted in anti-Semitism and misunderstandings of the purpose of Torah. If the Roman Church could separate the Jewish content within Torah and Tanakh, or the Old Covenant, then the Church could replace the Jews as the chosen ones and become the new Israel. Never had the apostles ever intended there to be a set of instructions for the Jewish people and a lesser set of instructions for the non-Jewish believer, or a separate Sabbath day for Christians. Unfortunately, these arguments persist to this day, to the point that those who celebrate the Sabbath are sometimes viewed as legalistic and narrowly focused on the law. One must understand and believe that God created the people of God through one man, Abraham. Abraham believed the promises God made to him regarding the Messiah and salvation. This faith was credited to him as righteousness. Abraham's faith created this new nation of people, not his lineage. No other people in the world have been created in the same manner as the people of God. They were set apart by the Holy One, or consecrated to be a light unto the world. This is the very foundation of our faith, that one that ought not and must not be separated into Jewish or non-Jewish relevance. After all, Paul stated there was no difference between Jew and non-Jew when it came to the faith. Those of us who are non-Jewish must understand that Yeshua came to clarify, not remove Torah. Being the Word made flesh, or God's instruction, Torah provided instruction for people, both Jew and non-Jew. Yeshua stated he was the Word made flesh, or Torah made flesh, here to walk out the instructions of God, which are always eternal, in a manner that brings life to the soul. This is a freedom in the law or instruction, instead of freedom from the law or God's instruction, which is actually rebellion. The Pharisees tied heavy burdens around the people of God, so they did not see the mercy of God, nor did they recognize their Messiah as the one sent from God. They instead twisted the meaning of Torah and made their own laws upon laws to remove a relationship with God from Torah altogether. Yeshua spoke directly to this false teaching by saying in Mark 7, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites, as it is written, "These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are but rules taught by men. You have let go of the commands of God and are holding on to the traditions of men." And he said to them, "You have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions." If Yeshua was going after the Pharisees about how they walked out Torah, this has relevance for those who believe the instructions of God do not apply to them as Christians because of Jesus setting them free from the law. Sabbath is a command that predates the giving of Torah at Mount Sinai, yet it is the most disregarded command of the 10. Perhaps we have been wrong all these years and need to look into what relevance Sabbath has for all believers today. Shabbat Shalom.